You're listening to Imperfect Heroes, Insights into Parenting, the perfect podcast for imperfect parents looking to find joy in their experience of raising children in an imperfect world. And I'm your host, DJ Stutz. Hey everybody, thanks for joining me here again today, and we have a great topic, a great guest. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that if you want to get in on my Parent Perspectives workshops, so those are at no cost to you, you just register. You register once and you'll have access to our live workshops the fourth Thursday of every month, plus if you register, I know that 1 o'clock in the afternoon Mountain Time may not work for everybody, so you can get all of the replays there at no cost as well. And so go ahead and hop over to the website and you can register there. Let's get started. So Dr. George Maurer, I saw your bio and I'm like, okay, I gotta have him. And so you are just singing my music. So Dr. George, why don't you talk to us a little bit about who you are and what we're going on?
Okay. Well, to start, I wrote my book to help people. It's called Critical Race Theory in Your School, How to Fight Back. And I had a coworker while I was writing this, and I was just about almost done with the book, and we were talking about it a little bit. And he mentioned that he had heard about CRT, didn't know what it was afraid that maybe his daughter was being indoctrinated with it, but didn't know how to ask questions. So he wasn't really sure where to begin. So I gave my book to him, and he came back a couple of days later and he said, "Thank you so much. I was able to go online, look at my daughter's class descriptions, and I was able to determine, at least from there, it does not appear she's learning any critical race theory, and I feel 100% better." That is exactly who I wrote this book for, because it's such a confusing topic. I've been in journalism for a long time, and I've always been kind of a news junkie and current events guy. And so in 2020, the COVID hit, and I retired from the Air Force in 2010. I'm a retired Air Force Master Sergeant.
Wow, congratulations. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Anytime. And so I used my post 9/11 GI Bill. I retired with an associate's degree. And so the post 9/11 GI Bill was such a good deal. I'm like, I cannot not use this.
Right.
So I went back, I got my bachelor's, I got my master's, and I had some left over. And I was like, I really don't know what to do with it. But then I discovered something called an education specialist degree, which is sort of a halfway between a doctoral and a master's degree. And I was like, I'm only 11 classes away from my doctoral degree. I think I'm going to do it. So I did it. And right around the time when it was time to create my dissertation, I did the EDD and I did a 2-year capstone project. And when I was looking for a topic, critical race theory was just something that was kind of popping at the time. And I was like, I'm really interested in this. And so I did it. And when I got done with it, my intention always was to turn it into a book. So I academic eased it, turned it back into English so normal people can read it. When you read academic papers, it always reminds me of Joey Tribbiani from Friends with a thesaurus.
Yeah.
He's just throwing long words in there just cause, without any real regard for what it actually means. So academics, I love to pick on academics because they're silly people. They're not nearly as smart as they think they are, kind of thing. So, but anyway, converted it into a book, released on May 9th, a couple weeks ago, and here I am.
That's so great. And what's the name of your book?
It is Critical Race Theory in Your School, How to Fight Back. What I teach parents to do is how to look for critical race theory, even when the words critical race theory have been removed. That's a
Yeah.
sneaky little tactic they use very often,
Right.
and how to create strategies to fight back if need be.
Right.
All through the book, there'll be primary lesson. Then we'll talk a little bit about something. Then okay, what was the primary lesson here? Then we talk a little bit more about something. What's the primary lesson here?
Hmm.
So that's the gist of the book for the most part.
Excellent. You're very right in them changing the name and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So in my teaching, I had both great and some negative experiences with me not being willing to use certain language in the classroom or with students on different things.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so I taught at low income inner city schools, and I refused to tell a single child that they were a victim
Good.
or that
It's the
they
worst thing
were.
you can do.
It's the
It's the
worst thing you
worst
can.
thing you can do.
And it's like so obvious to me
Yeah.
that how can
Yeah.
anybody think that this is okay?
Well, in my book, I talk about a number of things, but one thing that folks need to understand is that critical race theory and ethnic studies are not the same thing. Not
Correct.
at all. Ethnic studies is the positive, healthy study of one's culture, leading to self understanding, self confidence, self awareness, all the things that we need to be successful in life. Critical race theory is the relentless focus on only the worst moments in our
Hmm.
society without giving any due credit to all of the progress that we've made over the last several decades. And we've come
Right.
so far. So
Right.
far. I mean, in 1955, a man named Emmett Till was murdered for flirting with a white woman in Alabama. Okay.
Right.
Give you an idea of just how far we've come. Now, Stanford research, Stanford
Sure.
University research has said that ethnic studies helps all students, but particularly students of color and at-risk students. Just the kids that you were teaching.
Right.
They're the ones who need this ethnic studies program more than anyone. However, unfortunately, CRT has hijacked many ethnic studies programs across the country, especially here in California. There's a thing called the California Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum, mandatory by 2030, and they say there's no critical race theory in here. I went through it. I went through the first 600 pages, could not go any further, but it had 591 critical race theory code words in the first 600 pages.
Yeah.
Oppression, privilege, social justice, marginalization. If you look at your child's online school curriculum, the class descriptions, if you see those code words in there,
Hmm.
they're being taught critical race theory.
Right.
And so that's what you really need to look out for.
Right. And the language is so important. And the reality is, as we're talking, because, on our podcast, we really focus on those younger kids 8 and under, but they're getting hit. Even in preschool curriculums now, they're being hit. And I speak from experience because I was a kindergarten teacher in public schools for many, many years. I spent 3 years directing preschools for the school district. I had 3 different preschools. And then as I was working to finish up my teaching degree, I was working as a preschool teacher in that as well. So I'm talking to you from not only as a parent, but as an educator in that realm. What was interesting to me was once that we decided it was time for me to retire, we were going to move up to Chester, Idaho. And I was at the very last meeting and they were introducing the new social emotional curriculum for the next year. And I taught
Right.
that curriculum before. It's a decent curriculum. I
Yeah.
never had a problem with it. And I'm one who would have a problem with if things I didn't think were right. So at the end of the meeting, I raised my hand and I said, parents hear social emotional learning and the hairs on their neck will stand up. It's something that is a concerning term for right now. So what do you have to help us let parents feel comfortable with what we are teaching? And this administrator bristled up. She was with the district, bristled up and said, we don't even concern ourselves with those people. I said, what?
How crazy.
Yeah.
Parents have no say at all in this. Crazy.
Well, and that was the
Absolutely
end of
crazy.
it. I said, why
Yeah.
don't we? I always had an open door policy in my classroom, always.
Mhm.
And I didn't need any notice. Some teachers required like 24-hour notice
Hmm.
before a parent could come in. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
They catch me on a bad day. They see us on a bad day.
Yeah. In my book, I address something called in loco parentis, which
Mm,
is in place of parents.
mm-hmm,
And what it means is they did a study in one school, just ask. I mean, it's not a
mm-hmm,
scientific thing or anything, but they talked to teachers at one particular school and asked them, if you disagree with the parent's opinion on something, do you feel justified in interfering
mm-hmm.
in the parent student child relationship? 85% said yes.
Yeah, that's correct.
85%. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. And at their heart, the thing you need to understand is at their heart, critical race theorists are Marxists.
Mm-hmm.
They see socialism as the great wave of the future that will solve all of our problems,
Yeah.
poverty and racism and everything else. Of course, real history says 180 degrees the opposite. They're going to,
Yeah. All
people
you
in
have to do is look at
Venezuela.
history.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Venezuela was one of the richest countries in South
Mm-hmm.
America until they instituted communism. And within a
Mm-hmm.
few years, people were killing their pets so they could eat. It's crazy. But that's just the mindset of these people. And Marxists always go after the kids, always. And there's a good reason for that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever heard of a group called Moms for Liberty.
I have.
Okay. They are a group in Tennessee, started in Tennessee. They've got chapters across the country now. But how it started was a woman by the name of Robin Steenman. Her child watched one 13-minute CRT video. This was a little girl who always referred to everyone around her, all of her friends, regardless of race, the boy in the blue shirt, the girl in the yellow shorts, the boy in the red sneakers. She
Mm-hmm.
watched one 13-minute video, and suddenly the words, that black girl, that white boy, became standard in her
Mm-hmm.
vocabulary. And so when she went to dig into this thing and learn more about it, the curriculum that was there was called Wit and Wisdom.
Okay.
And when Wit and Wisdom was being taught to those kids, they started investigating Wit and Wisdom. The adults started going through these books. That first graders, kindergartners, the adults found themselves getting depressed
Mm-hmm.
at the nonstop negative, negative, negative,
Mm-hmm.
negative.
Mm-hmm.
And she asked a doctor, a psychiatrist, what is this negative, negative, negative? What is that? And the psychiatrist told Miss Steeman, that is called the psychology of shame. It is a brainwashing
Mm-hmm.
technique often used on prisoners of war after they've been captured. And these people are using it on our children.
Right.
They are low down. I don't even want to say what I think about them, but
Family show.
I mean, I get that. I cannot express my contempt enough. And again, one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons I was motivated to write this book.
Mm-hmm.
Parents, if you recognize this stuff out there, stand up, fight back. You need to for the
Yeah.
good of your child.
Yeah. It was really kind of sad. I was talking to a parent about a week ago just about some of the things that were going on in their child's school and just society in general.
Mhm.
And their attitude was, well, there's nothing we can do about it anyway.
There's a lot you can do.
Yes,
A lot.
there is. And it's almost like they didn't want, when I tried to talk to them about some of the things that they could do, it's almost like they didn't want to hear it.
Right.
And I was wondering, man, where does that even come from?
Yeah.
Other than that shame thing that you're talking about, that
Right.
we're supposed to feel this way because we really
Right.
are bad in our hearts, or we really are bad as a people. And so
Or so they say. Or so they say. Yes.
yeah, but we're not. We're
We're
not.
not.
I mean, yes, the natural man is an enemy to God, but each one of us has the light of Christ within us. Whether you believe or not,
Mhm.
it's there.
Mhm.
And that's
Yeah.
where we have our kindness and reaching out and knowing right from wrong, and that little thing inside of us that says, you shouldn't do that. And
This is
whether
right.
you do
This
it
is wrong.
anyway or not, It's there. You can beat it down so you pretty much goes away. Time you can do that, but it takes
Sure.
effort to get that light out of you. But the earlier they can start with our kiddos, the easier it is to kind of beat that out.
The old Soviet Union and Nazi Germany,
Yes.
they taught their kids to turn in your parents if they do
Yes.
something wrong. And a lot of them did.
Yeah.
A
They
lot
did.
of them did.
Yeah.
And that's part of the California's ethnic studies model curriculum. There's 3 or 4 classes in there that are social justice warrior training campgrounds. Okay. And they study techniques of like BLM. They study techniques of the TWLF. Oh boy, something Liberation Front. It was something that happened back in the early 70s. It's like one of their, I can't believe I can't think of it, but it's like their most famous activist group. But they study the techniques, and then they encourage the children, look for opportunities to become an activist in your neighborhood. Find something that's wrong and become an activist. And then in high school, when they've become indoctrinated in one of the classes, they go to elementary schools and they talk to the kids. And so not only are they getting it from the teacher, but now they're getting it from older children as well. And just to give you an idea of some of the content of these classes, one parent took a photo of one of those whiteboards that was in a kindergarten class. Kindergarten. And the class was supposed to be about freedom. Okay. In this freedom class, these children were asked to discuss the following 5 sentences, and I can always remember only 4, but it's white people have more than blacks, whites oppress blacks, whites harass blacks, and when you're in a war, you must fight. Okay,
That's crazy.
and these insane.
Yeah.
And these critical race theorists say by creating this racial conflict, somehow there will be a positive outcome on the other end. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense.
Hate begets hate.
Exactly. I mean, if you're going to stir these tensions, these racial tensions up between children, the only thing you can expect is bad things. I mean, common sense says you're going to have some problems in class after you're done with this class.
Right.
But these critical race theorists, there's no way they believe everything they're saying. No way in the world. They're intentionally doing this. And again, the grand Marxist plan, and you thought, oh, the Soviet Union fell, so communism's over. Not even a little bit. They are here and they are working in our society to take down capitalism and to install socialism. And China is their model. That's what they're working for. And their ultimate goal, since Karl Marx was alive, is a one world Marxist government where they control everything you do. And I mean everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we see a lot of that coming down from things like United Nations and the World Economic Forum and those things that are going on right now.
World Economic Forum. Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's scary. Man, if you really want to get pay attention to what's coming out there. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, they're not even hiding it anymore.
No.
They come right out and say it. They come right out and say it. But they're counting on the fact that most folks are too busy to spend the time to do a little research. And just like those parents, oh, it's too much. I get it. I do. If you do a Google search on critical race theory, the first 200 things that pop up are going to tell you that critical race theory is the most awesome thing in the world and it's going to cure racism. It's not. Not even a little bit. It's confusing. I get it. But again, that's why I wrote this book. I cleared the clutter out for parents and I got down to the nuggets of truth. Critical race theory is going to poison your child's mind. It's going to depress your child. Sometimes children have suicidal thoughts. Sometimes they feel guilty about who they are and consider things like murdering their families over the sins of the past. It's insane. It's crazy.
Well, and even if you just look at the numbers, so suicidal attempts in our young kids is way up. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. And so for them to try and say this is going to make things better, well, what's your track record? It's not there. And
show me the evidence. They don't have it. If they had it, they would show it. Believe me, but they don't have it.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really talk to the parents that I coach is you really do need to know your child's teachers. So when you have a teacher that won't meet with you.
Yeah. Not talking to the parent.
Right. So
Yes.
that's a red flag. And are parents
Absolutely.
allowed in for school celebrations, whether they do like a Halloween party or a Thanksgiving Day where they do family things? And so around Thanksgiving, we would do heritage. And I always had students from all over, Egypt,
Hmm.
Croatia, and
Yeah.
Ukraine, and all around. And
Yeah. Good.
I would invite their parents to come in, and this was
Good.
our November thing,
Of
and
course.
share something about their culture that
Yeah.
might be different than what the other kids are experiencing.
Hmm.
I had parents who were homeless that would come in and talk about their life, and not necessarily being homeless, but just, some of the things about growing up and some of their
Yeah.
family traditions and some of the food, we'd show food that they would eat in their
Right.
culture or
Right.
whatever. And embracing
Differences.
everyone with, yes,
Of course.
that they're a
Of
blessing and they're
course.
interesting and they're exciting.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. Yep.
yeah.
Well, it
So
sounds like your kids probably learned a lot from those experiences.
we did have
I
fun.
mean,
Yeah.
I know that in my travels in the Air Force, I wouldn't trade them for the world. I mean, I lived in the Portuguese Azores, I lived in Alaska, I
Wow.
lived in Korea, I lived in Japan. I mean, I
Right.
got to live in some really cool places.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just travel in that way is just something that changes you. You grow from those things.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I highly recommend travel to everyone. You don't have to go to the other side of the world. If you're from California, go to Idaho, see the trees. They're
Yes.
beautiful. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're from Idaho and you don't know any better, go to the beaches in Southern California.
Hmm.
Maybe you go to Chicago. I mean, just go see
Yeah.
something different.
Yeah.
And you'll be
Yeah.
surprised how interesting it is, how much you learn about yourself, even. So,
Especially about yourself. Especially about
mm,
yourself. And I think the more we get to know other people and other people as their culture, but not to say yours is bad and mine is bad, or mine is bad and yours is good, or whatever.
it's
Not
just
that. I
different.
just want to see who it
It's
is.
just different. That's
And you
all.
get to realize we're more alike than we are different.
Yeah. And you know what? Maybe they're doing something smarter than we're doing, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Maybe they got a system that's just better and maybe we can learn a few things.
Exactly. Exactly. And so that's where I kind of want to encourage our families is to get involved. And I know, one more thing. I'm sorry. It is.
Yeah.
And, you don't have to be like, I was a crazy PTA mom. I was the PTA president at so many schools.
Mhm.
I was like a regional director. I became the state president. And then I was even eventually on the national board of directors. You don't have to be that involved.
Right, of course.
It's just,
But
but you do need to
but
be somewhat involved.
yeah. And honestly, I mean, a teacher that doesn't let a parent into the classroom, what a red
Mm-mm.
flag. I
Oh,
mean,
huge,
what a red
huge.
flag.
Hmm.
Boy. Hmm.
And two, I think we're being told that this is how everyone feels, that everyone is
Mhm.
marginalized, that this is that, and that's not the truth.
Right.
And that what we're being told, it's not as dire and as angry. You can have friends. I've had friends that are from all different racial
Right.
backgrounds, political
Right.
backgrounds, religious backgrounds, and all of that is cool. I was shocked. Oh gosh, so 2 weekends ago, I was in California, in Northern California. It's about an hour north of Sacramento. And I have a grandson that's graduating from high school this year. I know I'm old.
Mhm.
And
Congratulations.
thank you, thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
they were having a special ceremony for this little town. It's called Oroville, California.
I've heard
And
of it. Mhm.
oh, you've heard of it. Okay, so there's
I've heard of it.
two main high schools and then an alternative high school in that town. And so the
Okay.
three high schools get together and they honor the top 10 of each one of the schools. And so my grandson is the salutatorian. He's 4.3. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
wow.
Yeah,
Very nice.
but here's what I was just shocked. I come to the auditorium, I sit down, And they actually had an opening invocation at this
Wow.
school event,
Hmm.
this school district event.
And no one
And
sued them for it?
no, and in fact, the J bomb was dropped many times, meaning
Wow.
Jesus. Yes, was
Wow.
dropped
Hmm.
several times. Once by the school district guy that was running it, and then the
Hmm.
students as they were talking about their dreams and what their plans for the future
For
were.
them.
And so
Yeah.
and I was just shocked. And I looked over at my son and I'm like, this is not what I'm hearing about California anymore. And he goes,
Right.
no,
Right.
this is different. This town is different. And they're doing stuff like this. So I think that they're more than pockets of hope. They are oceans of hope all
Sure.
over
Hmm.
where we just need to keep pushing. We need to set the example. Like I say, for my parenting, parents set the example. And so those who have a true understanding of who we are, and that there is that inherent good in all of us, even though, yeah, there's an inherent evil too. We're both, but we do have that God piece in
We have
us.
sin in us, no doubt about it. Yep.
Absolutely,
Yep.
we do. But we also have that tenderness and that kindness and that reaching out,
Hmm.
that desire to make something better. And if that's what we can example for our children, even our very youngest children, and our children, it's amazing when you see them in preschool and kindergarten, how most of them will naturally reach out to another child that's upset or another
Hmm.
child that's sad. And you can just see them go over and maybe just put their arm around that child, or
Mm.
they would come to me, so and so is sad. Well, what do you think
Yeah.
is making them sad? I don't know. Well, go ask them.
The innocence of children is very godlike, in my
Right.
opinion. I
Right.
think if there hadn't been sin, I think we would all behave like that all the time. So
Yeah.
those are
Yeah.
my thoughts anyway.
Well, and I think that's why they're going after the little kids,
Mm.
because they are closest to that experience with God. They are newest to our earth. And if they can get it out of them
They
early
can get them
on.
young,
Mhm.
and train them for life. Yeah,
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
time. It's sad. It really is. Well, it's even more than sad.
It is.
It's
It's
downright
evil.
creepy and evil. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so. So I think for me, the conclusion that we can get is that, yes, that's out there. And we need to really pay attention. And you tell me if you have a different opinion or want to add on to it. But there's so much more good that's out there than we realize. And there are so many people. I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care where you go to church, whatever, that we all have this ability to love and care about one another and to cross those lines, and that there are more people that are willing to do that than they will ever want you to think that there are.
I agree. I mean, in my time in the military, I worked with
Yeah.
many people of many races and backgrounds and all that kind of thing. And, I mean, there was conflict between us
Sure.
sometimes, but you know how many conflicts had to do with race? Zero.
Exactly.
None. None. If somebody and I, if another coworker and I were not getting along, it was because of something they did, something they said I didn't agree with. Maybe they didn't agree with me, but it wasn't about
Mm-hmm.
race. It was
Right.
about everything except race. In my neighborhood, I live in a neighborhood with people of many races. We get along just fine,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
just fine. Then it's not until these race baiters, and that's what they are,
Mm-hmm.
get involved, and that's when the problems begin. And honestly, I think a large part of it, yeah, they're Marxist, but at the same time, I think a lot of times they're doing it because they're making a buck off of it. I mean, you have certain people out there, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton,
Mm.
Ibram X. Kendi.
Mm.
They're all about race, all about
Mm-hmm.
race.
Mm-hmm.
And they come into these situations and they make things worse. They
Yeah.
collect money
Yeah.
and then they leave. And many times they haven't done anything for the local community.
Right.
Black Lives Matter, when they first started researching their money, they were
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, collected all this money, but what have you actually done with it? Have you
Yeah.
helped
Yeah.
anyone that you were supposed to help?
Right.
And the
No.
answer was no. And not only that, they
No.
were spending it on their own The one Patrice Cullors
all the
bought like a
houses.
$5 million house in
Yeah.
Los Angeles, and
Yeah.
she was paying the father of her child $1 million a year or
Yeah.
something for some kind of consulting. I mean,
Yeah.
just, and that's the worst part of it, is they come in there and people think, okay, we're going to get help here.
Yeah.
They're not here to help anybody. They're
Well,
here
like
to
I
help
said,
themselves.
I spent most of my time, all but 2 years of my entire teaching career, were in inner city, highly affected, lots of gangs,
Exactly.
all kinds of it.
Yeah.
And the politicians would all talk about equality in education. And yet, in my school, the carpet in my classroom, my facilities manager told me, was at least 40 years old, that I was supposed to maintain an iPad for every one of my students. I only had electrical outlets on 2 walls in my classroom.
Wow.
And so they would come and talk about all of these great things that they were going to do. And yet
And they never do them.
It never happened. Nobody walked the walk. But they were more than happy to put in this program, spend tons of money on this program and that program.
$15 million for this, $10 million for that. And meanwhile, your kids are walking around on a 40-year-old carpet. Yeah.
And you know why they wouldn't change it? There was asbestos underneath it.
You know, it seems like with a lot of these programs, the children are the last thing on their minds. The very last thing that they consider.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
crazy.
if you really want to make a difference, you can't have equal outcomes. It's just because we're human. You're not going to have equal outcomes, but at least give these kids in these poorest areas the opportunity to have.
They're the most deserving.
How about electricity on all 4 walls in there while you're supposed to use your computers and all of this?
Yeah, exactly.
How about a carpet? Can you imagine the germs that were in that carpet?
No, I can't.
How disgusting that would have been.
And I can't believe anybody walked out of that classroom without catching something.
I was sick every year. I was very sick every year. So real quick, before we end, let's ask you that final question.
Okay.
We know there are no perfect parents, but
of course.
Some do seem to be more successful than others. How would you describe a successful parent?
Well, I would describe a successful parent who builds enough of a foundation in their child's self-confidence, self-worth, self-abilities to be able to handle the many challenges that are sure to come their way, and give them the inner strength to overcome and persevere.
I love it. You're absolutely right. And then for us to have that same thing too, as parents.
Yes.
Overcome.
Absolutely.
And persevere. Wow. So, Dr. George Maurer, thank you so much. Man, you can see I get excited about this stuff, and I'm so glad that there's someone else.
I love it. So we need more people like you, DJ. We really do.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on here. I was more than happy to share the message. I love this conversation because I hate to see race holding us back.
Yeah.
And it's being done on purpose.
Yeah.
And that is what offends me more than anything.
True.
It just offends me more than anything. We are all brothers and sisters, and we all will get along just fine. And we generally do. We'll have our differences, of course, but it's just these people, and they're just stirring the pot, and they're doing it for their own purposes and their own needs, and they're making a buck off it, which is even worse. Because they're Marxists pretending, everybody should be equal and everybody should have equal pay. Yeah, except them. They're Marxists are only offended by wealth when it belongs to someone else. They never are offended by being wealthy themselves, if you'll notice. Pay attention to that. So
true. Well, Dr. Maurer, we're going to be putting some contact information and information on how to get your book in the show notes. So everybody check out those show notes. And until next week, let's find joy in parenting. See you guys. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of today's episode of Imperfect Heroes. Parenting is truly one of the most rewarding journeys we can take. But let's face it, it can be incredibly challenging, and sometimes we make it harder on ourselves than it needs to be. The good news is that with a little bit of work up front, there are practical steps you can take to bring more peace and joy into your family life. I am passionate to share these strategies and insights with you. If you're ready to step on the path to joyful, effective parenting, I invite you to schedule a family checkup. Just click on the calendar link in the show notes below, schedule a time that works perfectly for you, and let's work together to create a more harmonious and happy environment. And remember, every small step that you take today makes a big difference. So thank you again for joining us, and until next time, let's find joy in parenting.